Cleveland
Yes.
up today. So off-season here for Cleveland. The big move Jerry Jeudy traded for. Didn't have to give much to be their second wide receiver behind Amari Cooper. Desaun Watson makes his return after being ineffective before getting hurt last year. They signed Devin Bush, who not the greatest of linebackers at this point, but they needed to replace Sione Takitaki and Anthony Walker Jr., who both left at that linebacker position. Joe Flacco, after being signed off the bench and signed off an actual bench, not even a football bench, leaves to go to Indy to be the backup for Anthony Richardson. I actually think they did a good job here in replacing Joe Flacco to bring Jameis Winston in from New Orleans. So they still have, to me, a top-tier backup behind Desaun Watson. Myles Garrett's your favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year at 7-1. Nick Chubb. The first time we've seen the CBPOY on our screen, which is Comeback Player of the Year, at plus 850, one of the three favorites. We'll have the favorite for Comeback Player of the Year next week on the show in the AFC East. I think that one's fairly obvious of who that favorite is. But Alex, Cleveland last year rode a all-time great defense at home to a playoff spot. And in the playoff game, Joe Flacco threw too many interceptions. Their defense didn't hold up on the road, and they lose. But this is a team that they are going to go as Desaun Watson goes here in 2024.
Now, that I definitely agree with. And little pushback yesterday with Joe Burrow. But in this sense, it really does matter which Desaun Watson we are getting. Of course, the last 2 years, he's only played 6 games each of those 2 years. And we're still trying to find the Desaun Watson from his last year in Houston, who had 4,823 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, 70% completion. So if we can get that Desaun Watson, this team is looking very good. I still have a lot of confidence in them. I do think we'll see an uptick from him and his starts. I mean, last year he started 6 games. The passing completion did drop to 58%. So that is something that we definitely have to see get better here. But I still have them as a top 10 team in the league, especially defensively. And I'm glad you brought that up. That kind of slipped my mind. It was a pretty big split home and away. But still looking at the numbers and where they fit defensively in the league to finish the season are still very impressive. And we'll get into the defense even more. But also, shout out to the head coach, Kevin Stefanski, who has won NFL Coach of the Year 2 times now in the last 4 years. So he knows what he's doing. He's just done a great job with less. And even without their starting quarterback, still found a way to make the playoffs.
Yeah, there were rumblings. Remember, going into last year, Stefanski had somewhat of a hot seat going into last year. I never really bought that. I always thought he's a really good head coach. I mean, just look at the history of this franchise, especially since coming back into the league in the late 90s. They've been dreadful. And now you get 2 playoff appearances in 4 seasons for this Cleveland team. They've done it last year. I mean, Flacco was their 4th quarterback that started the game. They ended up starting 5 different quarterbacks when it was all said and done. But, I just want to bring this up with the Cleveland defense, where last year we brought it up a lot, where they were considered a top 2 defense last year. I don't think that was really the case. I thought last year when they were at home, they were dominant at home. I can't argue that. They were 8-1 at home last year. They allowed less than 14 points per game at home. They gave up less than 4.5. They gave up less than 5 yards a play at home. They were very impressive all the way around at home. When you took them out of their own building, I'm not even including the playoff game, which was a disaster by any stretch last year. Underwater on the road, they gave up nearly 30 points a game last year on the road. The yards per play went up to approaching 7 yards per play on the road, where, again, if you want to be an elite, at least to me, if you want to be considered the elite of the elite on defense, you got to do it everywhere. And as great as they were at home, where they were the best defense in football at home last year. No questions asked. But they were a bottom-tier defense on the road last year. Even more so than Desaun Watson getting back to himself, you got to hope there's no defensive regression at home, and you better hope there's positive regression away from home on Cleveland on the defensive end. I just have so many questions about this team going into the year more so than anything. That's why I'm a little bit lukewarm on their prospects here in 24.
I would imagine that you can use that to build off of, right? Having a good defense at home. I'm sure that they are well aware, especially the coaching staff, what they need to improve and needed to make that fix on the road. They still 17% of their opponent drives resulted in touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a good number.
Same as the Niners.
Yep, good number.
Chiefs were 16% to give you kind of a number to go off of there. But yes, we had some linebacker switches. I think they have the best secondary in this division. I also really like their defensive line and their offensive line. Plus, we haven't talked about offense very much. I think this is the second best, if not the best, skill position group in this division.
Let's see here. Nick Chubb coming off of the major knee injury.
Depends on that.
The major knee injury as well.
Nick Chubb back. Yep.
You're higher on the receivers than I am. I think that's what it comes down to more so than anything. I think Amari Cooper's a perfectly fine number one. Jerry Jeudy was a monster disappointment in Denver. Yeah, you can put some of the blame, I guess, on what the quarterback situation was, but he still didn't produce. We've seen Cortland Sutton at least produce, even when he's been healthy, even with mediocre quarterback play. Yeah, I think you're way higher on their skill position players. Just going off the top of my head, Cincinnati skill position players are better, at least to me. And Baltimore.
It's funny though, because if you look at and you compare each of these teams, they highlight different positions, right? Like Cincinnati doesn't really have a true tight end. I like the tight end here at Cleveland. I mean, they have they have 4 tight ends to be real, but not an elite tight end. And I think David Njoku is right up there in this league. So it kind of just depends. And then on the flip side, Baltimore, I mean, clearly going after Derrick Henry, running the ball.
And Andrews will be healthy again.
Andrews healthy, so they're more tight end heavy. So it kind of just, it's hard to just wrap and say skill positions.
More so than anything, Alex, just going to their schedule and their win total. They are 8.5, juiced over. To win the division, they're the long shot in the division behind us. I don't think that's correct. I think they should be shorter than Pittsburgh going into the year. We'll get the Steelers tomorrow, and there was also some news out of Steeler camp today that I know will make some waves out on punchlines later in the day. You know, we're going to learn a lot early. Way they played Dallas week 1 at home. Key at home for that one. At Jacksonville, and then 3 very winnable games in a row against the Giants, and then 2 roadies against the Raiders and the Commanders, which is a very weird back-to-back. And then they have to go to Philly, which then the schedule really ramps up 6 through 9, where they play 4 teams that I all have in the postseason going into this year. You know, schedule is all right. I think it's relatively manageable. But when push comes to shove here, I do have Cleveland missing the postseason. I think 8.5 is right. I think 8-9 or 9-8 are the right records more so than anything. I just don't buy Desaun Watson. That's all it comes down to more so than anything for me. I think Desaun Watson is a complete shell of himself at this point. And I don't think he was injured as early as they claimed last year with the shoulder. I know there was a year and a half of rust the year before, all right, but he was arguably worse than he was in those 6 games at the end of last year when you saw him on the field this past season. So I just don't think that Deshaun Watson of old is around anymore. I think he's on the wrong side of his career, and I don't think we see a guy that's better than about the 20th best quarterback in the NFL. Where if that's the case in this division, it worked last year for a part of it. I don't think it's working 2 years in a row in this division, and especially with this conference looking significantly more strong than it did a year ago. I think Cleveland to miss the playoffs is the best bet on the board here for the Browns. If we're going at it, as long as you don't have to lay more than $1.35, I think you're okay doing that with the Browns.
I'm glad you brought up those first 5 games there. I think that could be a good opportunity. See how they do. I think that looks like a 4-1 start.
Could be
pretty. Yeah, I mean they should take care of business in Jacksonville, especially if their defense travels, which should be one of their main points of emphasis there. So, yeah, maybe can jump on a better number going under with their win total. I do think that 8.5 is right there. Do you think Deshaun Watson, it's not so much age and where he is in his career, I think it's more mental, which is very scary, right? Because he's definitely been in his own head the last 2 years and since he's been in Cleveland and got paid all that money.
Yeah, sometimes guys just fall off a cliff. I mean, it happens. It just is what it's been with Watson, where I look in Houston, 3 unbelievably good years. And again, it's a guy who I didn't think was going to be that good of a pro coming out of Clemson. I thought he'd be fine. About a league average starter, was well above that for a few years in Houston. Now, he's arguably one of the worst starters in the NFL a year ago. But again, we'll see if Cleveland's defense adjusts. I'm just so worried about, forget just even if they have positive regression away from home, it is so hard to be that dominant on defense back-to-back years. It is so difficult, especially at home. It doesn't matter, home, road, whatever. If there's a little regression on the home front, a little bit alarming to me. And also, by the way, it's funny, you picked the Jaguar game as the one that potential. I think that's the one that the first 5 I feel confident they're going to lose, more so than anything. I think Dallas, that's a perfect spot to pick off Dallas when Dallas is ill-prepared.
Ooh.
So that may be the thing. And then, hey,
I was more thinking kind of caught off guard with one of those 3 that they should definitely be.
They could absolutely lose here, even though I feel pretty confident in saying this statement. It's the first time the Browns will be making the trip here to Vegas since the Raiders have moved here. That is going to be 75% to 90% Cleveland fans here in that game.
I'll take
that. That will be all orange and brown in the stands at Allegiant Stadium. That will be a home game for Cleveland more so than anything in Week 4. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Parles.
And I'm Alex White. Thank you for watching this clip of Sports by the Book. Please like the video, comment, and subscribe.
We live stream the show right here every day on this channel. Also, you can catch the podcast version on your favorite podcast platform.
All the links are in the description below. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.